The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Speaking with the Senator. I'm Kevin Avard, your senator, and I'm here with a gentleman who's running for state representative in the town of Brookline. And I want to welcome John Carr. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming on the show, and thank you for stepping up to the plate and running for office. A lot of people are easy to criticize and throw rocks and things and stones, and when it comes to stepping up to the plate, you start looking at things a little bit differently, and we appreciate you stepping up to the plate and run for office. This is good.
Thank you.
Your background is one in law enforcement. Well, there's a lot to talk about with law enforcement these days. Tell us about your background.
I worked for 20 years in Brockton, Massachusetts, which is a city on the South Shore, and it was a tough city.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to big cities, and they had their issues. And I get to see a lot of the problems that affect the community firsthand, the results of those problems, and whether it was gangs or drugs or opiates or just low-income poverty affecting the community, I get to see what the real issues were.
You saw a lot of activity. I mean, are you seeing it migrate north, or is this something that, because there seems to be this phenomenon that this whole opiate crisis in the last 5-8 years or whatever is just really pounding and beating us to death?
I think in the Northeast it's really exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the cheap price of that drugs and prescriptions, and I think it's something that we have to address, because right now there seems to be a lot of victims.
I went on a drive along with Officer Chris Finn. He's from Nashua, but he's a patrolman in Manchester. And when we went on the patrol, we did that. You guys get this morning briefing or this
roll call. And I'm just sitting there, and everybody's getting ready, and they're getting out these. They look like AR-15s. They're ready for. They're getting them out, checking all their guns, and all right, Senator, you need to sign this waiver. Okay, so I signed the waiver, and then they put the bulletproof vest on me, and that's when the reality of life comes. You're putting a bulletproof vest on me. I mean, and these guys do it every day. And it's getting more dangerous.
Yeah.
In these days.
And as they're doing I guess it's called the debriefing or something to that effect, during the roll call, what happened last night? Yeah,
they give a total back from the previous shift to the issues that they'll confront during the day.
And there was one gentleman. One gentleman passed. They died from the fentanyl overdose, and there was one that was saved with 7 attempts. But he was saved with 7 attempts of Narcan. It took 7 doses to revive this person, which means, and they're all talking about how strong the drugs are out there. And what they do is they chart these hot spots throughout the week. Well, there's a hot spot here. That means the surrounding buildings will have all these drugs. And I mean, he's just circling, just checking them out. I mean, they're active, trying to address this. And we did one call, and it was a domestic violence, and you're walking into angry people. I looked at Officer Finn, and I said, I got you back, man. I got you back. I didn't have a gun or anything.
Domestics are always a serious situation. The emotions run high, and there's family and close ties, and usually because of that emotion, things can erupt very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there was there was just people shouting back and forth, and he kept his calm, very professional, and his father was a police officer in Drake, so he just handled himself very well, and I felt very confident being with him. But that's every day. every day. And then on the news, you hear all these things, the Black Lives Matter and the whole anti-police sentiment. And after a while, I mean, how do you guys do this?
You really have to get involved with the community. It's very difficult. Brockton was a tough city. We had a very diverse community, but if you don't talk to the people or build some type of rapport, you're never going to get involved in what their issues are. And you have to be kind of a mediator between their families, the government, and the society as a whole. And they're facing an uphill battle because the economy in America today really hasn't done anything for them.
Right. And, we're fast forwarding now. You moved to New Hampshire. You're in Brookline, New Hampshire.
Brookline, New Hampshire.
One of our wonderful towns, and you're stepping up to the plate to run for state rep. What's driving this?
When I first came to New Hampshire, I wanted to run for the select board just because I wanted to get involved and help people make decisions for everyday people that could keep the budgets in line, keep spending down, and promote healthy development of economics with the business community, and also to see what I could do to help with everyday issues, because it seems like a lot of decisions nobody was paying attention. So I ran for the select board, and I'm in my second term on the select board. I'm the vice chair of the select board, and we have a really good board right now, and we're trying to provide the best service to the town we can.
I was a city councilor up in Franklin for a term, and you really learn a lot what's going on in your community. When you serve on maybe a zoning board or a planning board or school board, or selectmen, aldermen, these are really the key local areas where rubber hits the road when it comes to the community. One of your slogans or your bullet points is that you want to support local control. What do you mean by that?
Local control, because I think in every community, we're all part of a town or a city in the state of New Hampshire and the federal USA. But we want to make sure the decisions that affect local people are their decisions, whether it's school or budgeting or planning or economic development, because they're the people that every day have to live in that community.
I know as a city councilor, the mayor would say, well, we don't know what the state's going to do.
Oh, yeah.
Remember hearing that a lot, right? What's the state going to do? And it's important now that you know the effects of the state. By moving into that direction, you can feel for what our local communities are up against.
And another thing, if I'm successful and I get involved with the state legislature, I want to make sure that I'm not going to support unfunded state and federal mandates, because they directly affect the budgets of those communities. And if they're not funded, it's an uphill battle, and they really affect the bottom line.
A lot of people don't realize that about these unfunded mandates, and schools have to deal with them all the time.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely a big issue. What are some of the unfunded mandates that you had to run up against?
Well, the one I've seen on the city side, the town side, is special education, because Brookline Hollis schools do an excellent job, and they take care of all the students' needs. But some of those services aren't fully funded, so the school budget has to pick up the loss wherever it occurs.
And that's a very high price tag.
High price tag, because they offer excellent services. They really work well with the students, but those teachers are all specialized, and the cost is higher.
All right. And how would you address that from the state side?
I'd try to make sure that the state was funding those programs where they should, and with grants from the federal government or with grants from the state, block grants, but also to make sure that we weren't just passing the cost on to the school departments without at least exploring ways to control the cost.
Many people are concerned about jobs. I mean, right now we have our workforce is flat. We don't have room for. I mean, there are thousands of jobs that are waiting to be filled, and we don't have the workforce ready for that. How can we invite more economic growth when our workforce isn't ready or there?
Well, we want to encourage in the state of New Hampshire startup businesses to invest here, make sure it's economically feasible for them to invest here, keeping the business taxes down, and also making sure they can invest here, build here, hire here, and train here for the workforce that they can come in. If it's economically beneficial, they'll come in.
Right.
They can train people, and there's an abundant workforce just waiting to fill those jobs.
The small businesses that I talk to, some of their biggest complaints are the overregulation, and beating down with overregulation and compliance, and it's very difficult for people to come here and look at that high energy costs. We have some of the highest energy costs in the country. Our highest healthcare costs are right here in New Hampshire. Have you talked to any people? Are you knocking on doors? Are you hearing the same concerns?
I'm talking to a lot of people, and a lot of people feel like their economy, their budget just isn't working anymore because the costs are rising. I think we have to control the business costs, lower the electric rates, supply more service to neighborhoods and businesses, and keep those costs down without affecting the environment, because we have pristine resources in New Hampshire and we want to keep it that way.
What's your position about this pipeline then? I mean, there were many of us, and I was one of them, that we were fighting against this since the beginning.
Brookline was very active on the select board. We gave the approval and gave all the support we could to oppose the pipeline, the Kinder Morgan pipeline, because it just wasn't beneficial, and it would
They were basically coming through the town, and thank
coming
you very
through
much.
the town, no consideration for the homeowners and the town as a whole, and it would greatly affect us, and there's no guarantees to the safety of the project either.
Well, there's the safety, and from what I understand, there's no economic benefit to it because they wanted to export it, and they were just cutting through New Hampshire because Massachusetts was successful at stopping them.
It was a cut through, and we want to preserve property rights and stop this just random eminent domain where.
Well, we
there's
tried
no
with the eminent
consideration.
domain. There was a hospital, I think it was 1660, and it got shot down, or it got defeated. But if you get elected, will you support that?
I would support that.
Yeah.
With strong votes.
So, again, you're knocking on doors, you're meeting people. Some of the concerns, healthcare, businesses.
Healthcare, I'd oppose Obamacare because the costs are going up, the premiums. Every year we deal with the healthcare costs for the town employees, which the cost is always rising every year. There's really no relief in sight, so we have to make sure that we control those costs. And a lot of people forget, before Obamacare, we did have health care in America. And I think people have to remember that.
Yeah, and hopefully they do have memory. I remember when I used to sell health care, and it was actually for Mass Mutual. There was a program called the Mega Plan. I used to knock on small businesses, and because there was high prices back then in the 80s, and so this was an affordable plan for them. Because they couldn't get into the group plan back then. And I think Governor Shaheen signed a bill that didn't allow us to sell those plans anymore, so the providers just left the state because you couldn't cross the border. So, now there's no competition, prices go up.
And in this day, with technology, you should be able to go on your internet, go on your cell phone, and
you can buy car insurance across the border.
Buy anything across the border, get a price that works.
Right.
And it's sad when you see senior citizens in New Hampshire very stressed out over healthcare costs. Do they pay their rent? Do they pay their mortgage? Do they pay their healthcare? And you can see it in their eyes. They're just totally taxed out. So we want to control the taxes.
Now, recently the House and the Senate, and they passed this Medicaid expansion without a work requirement. And some people say, well, the federal government's going to pay for this. However, there's 50,000 more people that are now on this program. When the federal government reduces its funding, if if it continues, there's 50,000 people now that somebody's going to have to pay for.
And they'll look to the state.
And they'll look
Other
to the
towns.
taxpayers, right? And this is health insurance without a work requirement. They put no work requirement in, so they've basically expanded welfare.
Yeah, and those are costs that, as towns struggle to provide for the citizens and the workers in the state that are already here, we're trying to provide for them. We just don't have a means to do it for people that aren't working or that either come here, don't live here, just move in.
I'm worried about the people that are on fixed incomes. You know, their property taxes are going to go up, unless there's a sales tax, or we get rid of it, or we let it sunset.
And I oppose any income or sales tax.
Right.
Because I think those are taxes that would never go away. We'd have the property tax, the income tax, the sales tax.
You lived in Massachusetts. You know about these.
I know. In Massachusetts, those taxes, and the new word is fees.
Right.
Fees never go away either.
Right.
You know,
So yeah, these are things that hit home, and the decisions that we make up there affect the people's lives. Sometimes they don't affect them right away, but give it a year or two, and all of a sudden, it's time to pay for these programs. Everybody says, well, we've got everybody out of the emergency room. We got everybody out of the emergency room, but now there's 50,000 more people that are receiving this Medicaid. There's no work requirement, and the federal government made a promise. Sometimes they don't always fall through, the federal government.
and I'm looking forward. A lot of times, you don't hear the good side of the Republicans in the media, because the Republican legislature, and hopefully with a new Republican governor, we can really show what the Republican Party can do to control costs, to provide services, to build the economy, and these are good people that can do a good job.
And we've done a good job, and I appreciate that, because one of the things that is alarming to many of us senators is the fact that we worked on a budget, and in that budget we reduced the business profit tax, the business enterprise tax, not by a whole lot, 0.5%, not a lot, and we gave a good balanced budget, and the governor vetoed it. In the process of that veto, there are people on the disabled list, the disability, they call it the DD list, that are waiting for the funds to come through. There are people that are the opiate people. We increased funding for the opiate crisis. That was put on hold. And we had to come back, and then we had to override her veto. Fortunately, there were some Democrats that joined us. Actually, I think they all did. Because they saw that this is hurting the people. Now, her budget was now, our budget was now her budget. And now she's coming in for the trophy shot saying, look, right? And now we have a surplus. And she did all this. And we're all kind of going into convulsions up there, because we're thinking, we're scratching our head, how can you say that you did this when we had to override your veto? But we reduce the taxes. We're trying to reduce the burdens, and the public has to know that. She's coming in for the trophy shot, and she did everything to hold us up.
And that's their modus operandi, divide and conquer, tax and spend, and we have to. The Republican Party has done great things in the state, and they continue to do them. And we have to make sure that the people know that we're there to control the spending, give the services, and develop the state in a positive manner.
Right, and that's what we're trying to do. And hopefully, obviously, if you get in there, it'll be good to have a voice. There's another gentleman that's running on the Republican ticket.
Another Republican running, John Lewicki from Mason. And John was very instrumental in the stopping the pipeline.
Yeah.
And he was he's a good man, very conservative values, and he's knocking on doors, and he knows what it is to control spending.
I remember, I think one of the first times I met John was at a Brookline meeting, and we were getting together to talk about the pipeline. It's way in the beginning, and he's the type of individual that doesn't suffer fools.
Yeah.
You know, he's very direct, and I actually appreciate that about him. But he was there from the beginning, and the last time I seen him at the Capitol, there's a thing what we call a committee of conference, and he was there at the committee of conference when it came to the eminent domain, and the Democrats were against the eminent domain full bore protection, and they saw that they were going to lose this battle. So at the committee of conference, one of the senators added in the RGGI, the renewable energy thing, knowing that the House wouldn't support that. It was masterful at divide and conquer, and it killed the eminent domain. And it's a tragedy because all we were asking for was that the property owners, if this pipeline ever resurged its ugly head again, would have a degree of protection. If their property was taken, they would be reimbursed a certain degree, or they would have attorneys, or their moving fees were taken. There would be certain buffer zone, 250 yards or feet, or something to that effect, which would protect on a very small scale their rights. And they beat it. And it just, you wonder why they wouldn't protect that.
And it comes up all the time because the local control, because they're more interested in federal mandates, federal control. Mm-hmm. And we had in Brookline a mixed-use ordinance trying to be pushed through. Mm-hmm. And
what is that?
It was to mixed use where it could be residential and commercial, but it wouldn't protect the neighborhoods. But it had ties to federal money. Okay. And we, in the fine print, we would lose control of those decisions. So we stopped it, and it was because we would lose all control of what would affect Brookline neighborhoods.
I think Ringe has been very popular at defending their property, their community. From these federal grants, they come in, they promise you a new fire truck, or they promise you this, or they promise you that, and then the process in the fine print, like you said, is that you lose
control.
Your control of your town.
And you may not get money to support those things in the future.
Right. They give you the candy.
Yeah, yeah.
And once the bowl is finished, that's done. That's it.
It's like if we have something come to town, we want control and we want our people operating these things, and we want to protect the citizens, because every night when they drive home, it's their own house. They're driving in the driveway. It's not the federal government.
Right. And I think that's what's really critical about, you know, somebody who you've done public service, you've worked. You've lived on the streets, basically, protecting. Yeah. But on top of that, you're serving at a capacity as an alderman. And as an alderman, you see all these issues that most of us just take for granted. We're either watching TV, or we're on our cell phone, we're going to dinner, we're going to work. We don't know that something's happening. 9 people show up to the alderman meeting, or 5 people. You wonder, why aren't people concerned?
And on the select board, we meet every other week and sometimes every week, but there's so many issues, from schools to budgets to costs to fire departments to police departments to public welfare services for people that need things. And if you, and you know, most people are busy going to soccer games, taking their kids to school, working 2 or 3 jobs, and if we don't protect them at those meetings and do the right thing for the town or the state, but mainly our towns that we represent, we're not doing what we should. And I think that's the reason I got involved, and that's the reason why I want to help out at the state level, so that I can make sure that the state's doing the same thing that all our towns are doing.
And I think it's wonderful, because you know, some people say before you become a senator, you should serve in the House. And personally, I think before you serve in the House, you should serve on a zoning board or planning board or city council, selectman, alderman, because you feel the effects of what happens as a representative or senator. It's how it works, and it is a free education, right? If you get elected to one of those, and you also get the feel of, well, this person's for you and this person's against you, and now you got to come up with a decision to make sure that you've come up with the right decision.
I always, when I do my research, but I always make sure, am I doing the greater good for the most people?
Right. So, well, we appreciate that you coming on the show. How do people get in touch with you if they want to support your campaign?
They can just go to my Gmail account.
Sure.
JCSECGEN, jcsecgen@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or they can call me on my cell phone direct, 508-245-3834.
Great. Any final thoughts to our viewers?
Just, it's urgent. This election is very important for the welfare of the country, and I urge everyone to take their civic duty and make sure they vote. And I'd appreciate their vote because I'll serve them worthily.
Great. Thanks for coming on the show. We
Thanks.
really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And thanks for watching the show. And if you have an issue, you want to come and talk to a senator. And not everybody gets a chance to do that. So if you want to come on the show and talk about an issue, or if you're running for office and you need someone to discuss the issues with you, I'd be happy to do it. But until next week, thanks for watching.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.